Hey lovers, it's Susie from sacredwithsusie.com, and today I want to speak to you and share with you all about mastering your feminine body and your feminine wisdom, this beautiful feminine vessel and temple that your soul chose to incarnate in this lifetime. How does she work? How do we how do we be in this feminine body, right? It can be a trip, it can be a wild ride. And so I want to share a little bit about my journey, my relationship to being a woman, and how that's evolved over the years. And then some really beautiful pieces of wisdom around how we can live in alignment with our cycles and how we can really optimize our lives so that yeah, we're living in sync and in touch with the feminine body that we inhabit instead of against it. Mm. So a little bit about my journey, really quickly. When I was younger, like say 17, 16, I hated being a woman. I hated having a period. My best friend and I used to say being a man would be so much easier. My gender on Facebook was even a guy because I thought it was funny. And yeah, I just had this like interesting relationship to being a woman where I rejected it. And I wasn't really a tomboy. I was always quite a girly girl when I was younger, but then when I was, yeah, like 16, 17, 18, 19, I developed this strange relationship with being a woman where I rejected it. Like I said, I thought it was easier to be a man. I was a man on Facebook. I was a guy on Facebook. I'd like kind of wear more male clothes sometimes. Anyway, I had this rejection energy to being a woman. And I was on the pill, and then I got Implanon in my arm for the pure reason to not cycle, to not have a bleed, because I hated having a bleed. It was painful, it was uncomfortable, it sucked. So that was my general, like, really short Cliff Notes version relationship to being a woman when I was younger. And since being on Implanon, it kind of got discovered that I got diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then I went on this whole healing journey to heal my cycle, heal my body, heal my relationship to being a woman, to the feminine energy, to the feminine essence, to then now becoming a feminine embodiment and empowerment mentor. So I've been on this really long journey within that, right? And in terms of like menstrual cycle challenges specifically, my version of PCOS, because there's many versions and I don't really fully identify with even having PCOS anymore. But what my symptoms used to be painful periods, so incredibly painful cramps during menstruation and irregular periods. So they were my main symptoms. And I have had a few bleeds now with absolutely zero pain. Like none. No pain at all. And so this is why this is so important for me to share, because when you learn to live in alignment with your cycle challenges disappear. They actually disappear, and it's actually quite simple. And so many women are living in opposition to how their feminine body wants to be, to our natural state and essence and energy, like I was for so many years. And that's why so many women have all of these menstrual cycle challenges or hormonal disturbances or PCOS patterns. So, a really quick overview on our cycles, because our cycles are such a huge part of being a woman. And society as a whole doesn't live in a cyclical fashion. Nature functions in a cyclical way, right? We cycle from spring, summer, autumn, winter. Nature goes through cycles of death and rebirth. The moon flows from a new moon growing to a full moon, receding back to a new moon or a dark moon, right? Nature flows in these cycles and seasons. Society, not so much. The feminine energy flows in cycles and seasons, just like our feminine bodies. Society tends to function in a masculine energy of constantly doing and productivity and achieving and more success, right? It's like this do, discipline, um, achieve more, succeed more energy. It's always growing, it's always trending upwards. Like that's what we view as good, worthy, um, successful is like this trending upwards direction, right? Which is in a cycle. Nature flows in a cycle like this, right? Like growth happens in summer and then decay and death happens in winter. So it's growing and then it's dying. It's not constantly growing, right? Nature doesn't work like that because it's not sustainable. Nature does what is sustainable. That's why it's so good at sustaining life. That's why it's existed for so long, right? Constant productivity is not sustainable. Cyclical nature, going from growth to death, rebirth again. That is what is sustainable. That is how nature works. And that is how our feminine bodies work. So nature is related, connected to the feminine essence. If you look at Tantra or masculine, feminine energies and these principles and where they come from, the feminine energy is the earth. She is Mother Nature. She is Pachamama. She is the earth. She is movement. She is living things. She is creation. She is birth and death, right? The masculine energy, the feminine is Shakti or yin energy, earth energy. The masculine is Shiva, consciousness, the sun. Again, the sun is like productivity, action, full blown, like outward energy, right? So the feminine essence is intimately connected with nature, with Mother Nature. And so the feminine essence is intimately connected with the seasons and cycles of the earth. And that is why our feminine bodies, our feminine vessels, our feminine temples cycle just like the seasons of the earth and the seasons of the moon. And so our beautiful bodies have 4 seasons in our cycle, just like the earth does. We have in a summer, in a winter, in an autumn, and in a spring. So what that looks like, I'm going to like layer that perspective of looking at it over the scientific terminology for the phases of our cycle and give you just a brief kind of full out overview on the phases of our cycle and how we can start to live in alignment with the phases of our cycle instead of in opposition to the phases of our cycle or in opposition to our bodies in general. Okay, so I'm going to start at our bleed. Our bleed, menstruation, is in a winter. It is the time for hibernation. Think of Earth winter. Everything starts to slow down. Everything starts to draw within. The bear goes into the cave to hibernate. Everything's resting. Everything's kind of dormant. And you want to be like cozy and warm, right? The same is true for our inner winter. During our bleed time, it's a time to slow down. It's a time to hibernate, to go into our womb cave, to rest, to replenish, to nourish, to fill up on our own energy, to say no, to the world, to the external world, and yes to ourselves. It is a time of deep rest. It is a time to be with self. It's a time for slower cooked foods, easily digestible foods like soups and stews are really, really nourishing in this time of our phase, of our cycle, excuse me. So slowness, integration, internal coziness, being as slow as possible, moving slowly, doing as little as possible, less doing, more being. It is the time when we're most connected to source, to spirit. The archetype of this phase of our cycle is the wise woman or the crone or the oracle. It's when we're most connected to our feminine intuition, our inner wisdom, to God, goddess, spirit. When we allow ourselves to rest, we can channel in this phase of our cycles. And yeah, so it's when we're most connected to the spirit world. And so you might notice in your bleed, I certainly get like a brain fog, or like I call it period brain. My brain doesn't work anywhere near as fast. I fumble over my words. I can't think as quickly. My brain literally slows down because my being is not, my consciousness is not in my brain, it's in my womb. My consciousness isn't in this physical world, it's in the spirit world. It wants to connect with source. It wants to recede back. This is winter, this is the death, so that the rebirth can happen, right? So then we move into inner spring, which in scientific terms is the follicular phase. So after the shedding of the uterine lining, we enter inner spring, the follicular phase, where one follicle is chosen in our ovaries to grow and mature over the rest of the month to eventually be released in ovulation. So the follicle, there is one follicle in the ovary that is chosen to start to mature. That's why it's called the follicular phase. This relates to inner spring. So our energy is starting to reawaken. It's the archetype is the maiden. It's innocence, it's play. It's like this is the time of our cycles where we want to try new things, have new experiences. We're starting to wander out into the world. Think of the energy of spring, of flowers starting to bloom, life slowly starting to creep up out of the earth, right? So this is when we can start to put more on our plate of things to do. Like I said, do new experiences, new things that we've never done before, go on adventures, meet new people, try a new hobby. These are all beautiful things to do in a spring. And then we enter in a summer, which is ovulation. It's when the egg is chosen to be released. Well, it's already chosen. It's when the egg is released from the ovary. Ovulation. This is summer. This is when we're the most outgoing. Our energy is the most outward facing, in direct opposition to winter. It's when we have the most energy to do all the things. It's when you can fill your social calendar, your work calendar. You can be everything for everyone. You can be productive. You can be active. You can, in terms of exercise, this is when you can do the most exercise, the most high intensity exercise. Go for a run, whatever nourishes you the most, right? Lift weights. Summer is the do energy. It is the archetype of the mother. The mother can do and be everything for everyone. And summer is a beautiful inner ovulations. Inner summer or ovulation is a beautiful time, a beautiful, beautiful time. But what happens is most women and society in general think that we should always be in that energy. We should always be in that inner summer energy, right? And then that's when we put pressure on ourselves, and that's when we deplete ourselves, because we cannot be in the energy of inner summer all the time. It is unsustainable. Just like the earth cannot constantly be in a state of summer, it just doesn't fucking work. The same is true for our bodies. So summer is so beautiful, and we celebrate it and we appreciate it and we make the most of it when it is here. And we love all of the other phases of our cycle as well, because they are just as beautiful and they have their own specific intention and beauty and place in our lives and in our cycle. So that's inner summer. That's the peak of energy, the peak of all the things. And then we slowly start to enter inner autumn, which is the luteal phase. And so what's going on internally in the body, the the follicle, the egg inside the follicle has been released from the ovary, and the follicle that stays behind in the ovary then becomes what's called the corpus luteum, and that's why it's called the luteal phase. So this phase of our cycles, again, just like autumn, is the season of starting to slow down, starting to draw within, starting to take stock of, your to-do lists, and just starting to maybe like say no a little more. Say no to things a little more. Start to draw your energy inside. Realize that you can't do and be everything for everyone, and it's a time for self-care. It's a time for starting to prioritize yourself, right? In a summer, you don't necessarily need to prioritize yourself so much. In autumn, it's a beautiful time to start to prioritize yourself, rest, self-care, slowing down, starting to use your boundaries, starting to say no to things that aren't filling you up or aren't fully serving you. And inner autumn, the archetype of inner autumn is the wild woman. And this is also the phase of our cycle where PMS occurs, which is premenstrual syndrome. So it's literally just the terminology of a bunch of things that happen to women just before we bleed. And PMS is not a fucking real thing. PMS is a result of not listening to the wild woman, and the wild woman going a bit fucking crazy and nutso on everything because you haven't been choosing and prioritizing yourself, right? So the wild woman is the archetype inside you that is activated in inner autumn if you have not prioritized yourself at all this cycle or the last few cycles or your entire life, right? So that's when she gets a bit fucking cranky and a bit fucking short with everyone. And so the wild woman is actually acting in service of our bodies. She's actually like a fierce gatekeeper of our bleed and of our energy. And she wants to protect us. And that's why she gets a little bit feisty with people, because she's like, I need my time. I need to prioritize myself. And that's why, again, she gets short with people, right? So in order to experience less of this feisty energy of the wild woman that maybe creates chaos in your life and your relationships, allow yourself to listen to the energy of inner autumn. Understand that what the wild woman, is asking of you is to prioritize yourself and to take the action you need to take, to set the boundaries you need to take, to start to choose yourself a little bit more during this phase. Start to prioritize self-care. Take 5 extra minutes in the morning to create a beautiful skincare routine for yourself. Take 15 minutes for yourself extra in the evenings before you go to bed to meditate or stretch or have a bath, right? They don't have to be long periods of time. I know a lot of us have very full lives, right? Take chunks of your time through your day, especially in inner autumn, to prioritize yourself, prioritize self-care, and PMS will disappear. Autumn is also the longest phase of our cycles. It's about 2 weeks, right? Summer is the shortest phase of our cycle, so that's also good to know. Inner summer lasts about 4 5 days. Inner autumn lasts about 2 weeks. And so the start of inner autumn is when you can still be doing things, you can still be external, but you're just noticing, or you're just setting a subtle intention to slow down. You're looking at your calendar for the next 2 weeks and you're starting to leave space. Yeah, you're starting to schedule space for the end of autumn and for winter, so that you have space in those phases to be with yourself, so that you don't have big crazy plans, right? And this is where living in alignment with our cycle and our bodies and not against it really comes into play. So like looking at your calendar before you're bleeding, before you're in the 5 days before your bleed, looking at your calendar before then and carving out the space in that time intentionally. So you can do that at the start of inner autumn, right? Or you can do that in spring. You can do that at any time. But like forward thinking and forward planning to create that really nourishing rest for yourself at the end of inner autumn and the start of inner winter. So the end of the premenstrual phase and the start of menstruation. And this has been the biggest game changer for me. As I mentioned, every single bleed of my life, except for a few, I have had incredibly painful menstrual cramps. Incredibly painful cramps. And the few cycles where I haven't had any pain whatsoever in my bleed is because I rested before my bleed. In the 3 to 5 days leading up to my bleed, I deeply rested, right? The end of inner autumn, I really focused on self care practices, saying no to things, being with myself, like nourishing my body, moving more slowly, um, intentionally doing things that nourish my feminine energy, like creativity, play, pleasure, sensuality, so dance, using essential oils, giving myself beautiful, indulgent baths and facials, painting, being creative, playing with clay. These are all things that nourish the feminine essence. If you can create space to do these things, especially at the end of inner autumn, and especially really intentionally slow down at the end of inner autumn, just before you bleed, I almost guarantee that you will have a beautiful bleed. Maybe not the first time if you have been living a wildly different reality to this for your entire life. It might take a few cycles for this to happen, but really, any pain during menstruation, I truly believe is just your body asking you to slow down. Because when you're in pain, you can do nothing, right? All you can do is just lie there in pain. At least that's what happens to me when I have incredible menstrual cramps. I can't do anything except be in pain. And so the pain is just there to make me stop because it's the only thing that would have made me stop in the past. It's the only thing that would have made me rest in the past. So my body had to create pain so that I rested. But when I started listening to that message and I allowed myself to rest without pain, then I didn't get pain because the body did not need to send that message to me anymore. Does that make sense? mm, yeah. So there's so much more on this topic of living in alignment with our cycles. There's so many different things that we can integrate. But I think I'm going to leave it there for now so that this can start to percolate in your system. You can start to play with the suggestions that I have given. You can start to just notice the different seasons of your cycle. Maybe you download a period tracking app. If you've already got one, amazing. Just notice those 4 phases. The app will tell you when you're obviously in menstruation. You already know when you're bleeding. The app will tell you when you're in your follicular phase, your ovulation, and your luteal phase. It tells you those things. So again, menstruation is winter, follicular is spring, ovulation is summer, and luteal is autumn. So just start to notice these energies, start to play with these energies. Please start to slow down and say no in inner autumn. Say fuck no in inner winter. Allow yourself to rest and really deeply nourish your feminine in the 3 to 5 days before your bleed. And ideally, day 1 and maybe day 2, you're doing as little as possible, as in day 1 and 2 of your bleed, right? Ideally, day 1 and day 2 of your bleed, you're doing nothing, ideally. If that's not possible within your realm of reality, do as little as possible. And if you're not able to do nothing, set the intention that what you are doing, how you are showing up to life is coming from a yin energy, from an energy of relaxation, from an energy of surrender, not an energy of rushing and overwhelm and stress and pressure and I have to do all the things. No. Even if you still have to do all the things, change the energy, shift the frequency at which you're vibrating, shift the energetics of the actions that you're taking to be from a place of slowness, surrender, and love for your body. You can actually infuse that energy and that intention into whatever action you do. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you can sit with that energy. One of the bleeds that I had no pain, there was a moment on day 2 that I got a little bit stressed and overwhelmed and started to move a little bit faster and was like, "Oh, I have to do this and get here and be here for this person." And I could feel my wombs start to like make some like noises, right? Like start to send a little bit of pain and a little bit of discomfort into my body and I was like, oh, "Okay, slow down, breathe." I put my hands on my womb. I still went and did the thing. I still drove and saw this person and did the filming and did the things I needed to do. But from a yin, relaxed, surrendered energy. I drove there with a hand on my womb the whole time. I let myself breathe deeply. I told myself there was no rush. And the tiny little bit of discomfort that arose, it went away. So you really can infuse this energy and intention into whatever you're doing. If you do absolutely necessarily have to do things on day 1 and 2, you can still infuse this energy, this yin, relaxed energy. Okay, same in those 3 to 5 days before your bleed. Infuse that slow, relaxed, gentle energy. Alrighty, my loves. I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please type them below and I will get back to you. Let me know if this was helpful. I really do love to receive your comments. And yeah, if you want to get more into my world, follow me on Instagram at Sacred with Susie. Check out my offerings on sacredwithsusie.com. In my beautiful 4-month deep dive program, The Fully Expressed Woman, we go deeper into menstrual cycle wisdom and living in alignment with your cycle and really deep into feminine energy, embodiment, and energetics. I hope you have a beautiful day and you start to play with these really potent tools and practices and really like ancient feminine wisdom that women have been living like this for centuries and it's slowly been lost. We are the ones that are bringing this wisdom back into the world, back into the feminine, and we are the women that will pass this on to our daughters, and that is so fucking powerful. So thank you for being here on this journey. Thank you for being a woman that has chosen to tap back into that ancient feminine wisdom and restore a more balanced, harmonious template into the planet, into the world where masculine and feminine energies are equally revered and honored and, yeah, work in beautiful harmony and divine union. Mm. Mwah! I love you, and I'll see you soon.